Okay, so this lesson is all about unit rates. The learning target, I can determine the unit rate associated with ratios of fractions measured in like or different units. So it actually could be ratios or rates. So we're determining unit rate based on that. A couple of different things that you're going to want to remember when thinking about unit rates are that unit rates must have a 1 in the denominator. So when you're saying the unit rate of something, you always want to have 1 in the denominator, or you want to say the number 1 second. Which brings me to the second point. Remember RadyCat, every time he says a unit rate, it's going to be per something. Okay, we all know that was an annoying video, but it will help us remember unit rates because it says per. So we have per person, or per mile, or per gallon of gas. Those all indicate unit rates because that indicates one of something. So this is an exaggerated per, just to help you remember that cat video, but the actual word per is per, and then you can indicate per with this division line. So you would say centimeters per second in this case. So if you see those things, those all indicate unit rates. For this lesson, you will need the foldable that looks like this when it's folded up. It looks like this when it's flat. So you're going to need to cut out. You remember, you cut on the dotted lines and you fold on the solid lines. So if you need to pause the video, take a second to get yourself set up. That works for me. Just come on back when you're ready. Alright, so let's look at the problem at hand. The problem that you were supposed to cut out, just glue it on this top flap, and we can move forward. So it says Jennifer can read half of a 500-page book in every 2.5 days. If she continues at this rate, how many days would it take her to read 3 books that are 500 pages? Well, it makes a whole lot of sense to me to create a table to help you solve this problem. Creating a table is a strategy, problem-solving strategy you can use for lots of problems in mathematics. So if you do end up drawing a table, you want to first look back in the problem and see what are the variables I'm trying to figure out here. In this case, I annotated and I realized that half of a 500-page book every 2.5 days. We're talking about pages in a book, and we're talking about number of days. So that's why I filled in pages here and number of days here. We know, and I have it here in my table, if it's half of a 500-page book, we're talking about 250 pages. So we can read, this person, Jennifer, can read 250 pages in 2.5 days. That is what's given to us in the problem. So we're going to fill that information in. And then I went ahead and put some numbers above and below so that we can start figuring out the actual answer to the question at hand. So we all know 1, or you should know, 1 in the table represents the unit rate. If we're trying to figure out the unit rate, we learned this the other day when calculating all the unit rates from the rates of the cars, the different cars that we raced, that you're actually just going to do some division. So you're going to take the number of pages and you're going to divide by 2.5 to get your unit rate. So we have 250 pages divided by 2.5 days gives me 100 pages per day. So we have 100 pages per day is the unit rate. Per day. Huh. Had to throw that in there. So then that makes scaling up from here a whole lot easier. You want to always use the information, the 2 points that you're given, which is what was given in the problem, to scale down and find the unit rate, and then scale back up to figure out all the other different information that you need. So this kind of lays out, if you're looking at it pictorially, you can see that 250 pages in 2.5 days would give me 100 pages per day as well. So if that picture makes sense to you, you can also draw that. So if we have 100 pages in 1 day, what would make sense for how many pages in 2 days? If you want to take a second, think about it, and then come back on and figure out if you got it right. It actually makes sense to have 200 pages for 2 days, because if you have up here, we're scaling up by 2, so 1 times 2 is 2, so 100 times 2 is 200. Same thing here, 1 times 5 is 5, so we have to do 100 times 5 to get 500. If you want to take a second to fill in the rest of the table and then come back and see if you've done it correctly, that works out. So 1 times 10 is 10, 100 times 10 gives me 1,000. it says 1 times 15 is 15, and so this would be 1500. 1 times 20 is 20, so this would be 2000. So this just gives us a visual. If she's reading this much, this is what's going to be kind of coming up in the table. You could also have values in between. That also works. So if we're looking here, let's look back at the problem. If she continues at this rate, how many pages would it take her to read 3 books that are 500 pages? So it says for 500 pages, if I'm looking at my table, it takes her 5 days. 500 pages, 5 days. So for thinking about 5 days equals 500 pages. Okay? It says 3 books that are 500 pages. So we're having to look over here. 3 books that are 500 pages. So if she did this 3 times, how many days would that be? So we have, let's just rewrite this 3 times and it's very easy for us to see. 5 days, 5 days. If we're looking at this, we see we have a total of 3 books that are 500 pages. Well, 3 times 500 gives me 1500, which is what we have here, which equals 15 days. You could have also looked up in the table and said, well, I know that's 5 days for 500 pages. So if I do that 3 times, 15 days is going to give me the 1500 pages that I need. Either way works. So in recapping, this is actually our answer. It's going to take her 15 days to read these 3 books that are 500 pages long. What we figured out is half of 500 is 250. That was the first step in figuring out what this is, because we had to figure out what half of 500 was. This is a good opportunity for me to remind you of this. Of in math means multiply. So if we did 1/2 times 500, that also gives us the 250. So we have 250 pages in 2.5 days, which equals 100. So in this case, what is our unit rate? Unit rate. Identify that from the table. Write it right here. I want you to pause it, figure it out, and then come back. So hopefully you're thinking 100 pages per day. So you can either write the word per, or you can actually use a slash right there. That means the same thing. It's very important that you're able to figure out the unit rate from a table. Even though that's not exactly what this question was asking, it's important information to know. Alright, if you don't have questions, if you do, come and see me. You might want to state your answer. It would take her 15 days to read 3 books with 500 pages in them. Okay, there's your answer. We worked all the way through this. So, if you don't have any questions, you can go ahead and pull out the other foldable. What you're going to do, you're going to glue this one down. We'll fold it up like this with that slit. You're going to glue it down right here where it fits. Then you're going to take these 2 questions, you're going to cut them out, and it should fill the next page. So you're going to take the top question, cut it out, you're going to put it up here, you're going to show your work to solve in this space. Then you're going to put the second question, and you're going to show your work to solve in the space at the bottom. This should take up pages 47 and 48 in your notebook. So don't forget to go back to the front of that table of contents and fill in the 2 sections. Now, if you put unit rate and proportional on page 47, then yours will just be 48 and 49. Okay, so if there's a little discrepancy in page numbers, it's no problem. You just need to make sure it's reflected in your table of contents.